there's so many ways that we can learn to cope with things. I mean, we all struggle with things like feeling sad or feeling depressed or feeling anxious sometimes. I mean, they're usually related to things that are happening in your life, and there's ways to cope with that. And by the same token, it's not always bad to kind of lean into those feelings and just accept that, okay, I'm feeling bad right now for a reason. I'm gonna just like sit with this and it's okay. And it's actually not the end of the world. And I'm not gonna feel like this way forever. And it's not gonna kill me. And I think that as a society, we've taken the opposite approach.
Yeah, I totally agree. Both, I think through this medicalized story of, incurable brain disease bullshit, and then also I think through the rise of the therapy industry and, growing up in therapy basically once a week, eventually twice a week, every single week of my life through my teens and 20s, you end up, the more that therapeutic encounter becomes your go-to source of support, which I do think can happen. It can happen more easily than you even realize, where you just come to rely on this professional sitting in front of you to pour out your pain and receive it. It does. I think for a lot of people, there can be this reinforcing feedback loop where you just like need to be in pain so that you can feel seen and validated, and you just kind of bring this endless supply of problems in yourself that you're calling problems and that you're focusing on and prioritizing. For me, I ended up not only becoming just terrified of my pain, because I was thinking of it as this disease that was progressing and getting worse, but I also became just completely self-absorbed about it and just like totally focused on myself all the time. How I felt was like more important than anything else. And that I think is we're seeing that play out in the culture at large. I think in a lot of these like polarized issues that people get so heated about, I can't help but wonder if the therapeuticization of, of the kind of younger millennials and Gen Z is, a big part of why that's happening.
Yeah. Do you think that therapy is ever helpful? I mean, I think I've been like a long time proponent of therapy. And I know that as a woman who was like heavily involved in feminism for most of my life, like from teenagerhood, I did honestly sort of have this approach to men and my boyfriends, for example, where I'm like, you all need to go to therapy. And I don't necessarily feel that way anymore. And I feel like there's other things that are lacking in our lives that if we added back in would probably be a lot more helpful and useful in terms of us feeling good about our lives and feeling fulfilled and things like that. And probably accepting that men and women are different and so and so forth. But I mean, do you think that I don't expect you to say, oh, all therapy is bad, but do you think that we've sort of overemphasized therapy as a solution to our woes and our problems in our culture?
I think we have. I think it's a symptom, not to medicalize it, but the fact that therapy is so predominant, I think, speaks to the lack of other spaces that we see before us to kind of turn to for comfort, for guidance, for support. Spaces that Robert Putnam wrote "Bowling Alone" many years ago, and of looking at this over the in the last century, half century to century, just the increasing loss of spaces in our local communities where people can connect with one another. I think whether the rise of the therapy industry is a result of that, or is maybe even fueling the demise of non-clinical, non-professional spaces where people can support one another, I'm not sure. But I do think you're right that it has it's for, I think a lot of people view therapy as like the only real reliable place you can turn for help. And I do think therapy can be really helpful. I mean, I might be a bit cynical here, but I think it speaks more to the individual therapist than to any kind of, oh, this therapeutic modality is amazing. I really think it's about the human being who is in this therapist role. And if there's someone who's connected to their heart, who's connected to a sense of humility, openness, curiosity, tolerance of risk and uncertainty, then they might be, an incredible therapist. I think it's also about like, is the therapist's objective to make him or herself obsolete to the client or not? And I happen to be in front of therapists who fell in the or not category. And I just like, it was my baseline operating assumption. Like, I'm going to be in therapy for the rest of my life because I have all these problems and I'm going to need a place. Like, I'm never going to not be mentally ill. And my therapist didn't really ever challenge that baseline operating assumption, which I think is part of why it was just so unhelpful for me in particular.
Yeah, I mean, they want to keep their job.
Mm-hmm.